Good evening, this is Brown at Eye of Brown, and tonight we're going to talk about the character of Machine Man, more specifically, some individual stories featuring Machine Man. And I had recently done two reviews on the character of Machine Man, namely the Machine Man, the Complete Collection, which collected the entirety of his original series, and most of the stories that had been written and illustrated by character creator Jack Kirby, as well as all the stories that had been illustrated by Steve Ditko when he took over on art duties. And the other book I reviewed pertaining to Machine Man was the 1984 miniseries collection, known as Machine Man 2020 in some circles, because it took place in the year 2020. Now, having read both of those books, I realized that there were some individual stories featuring Machine Man that had some vital plot developments and character developments that were important to him that turned up in the 1984 miniseries. But having read the miniseries, without having read these individual issues, I got the basic gist of what was going on, but the full, I guess, emotional impact was lost on me because I hadn't been able to get a hold of these individual stories. But I recently had a chance to do so and I finally got around to reading them. And so I was just gonna give a quick take on on these individual issues, and basically if they were any good, or how relevant they were to the character of Machine Man. So first up is excuse me, Marvel Team Up issue 99, and it was done in 1980, and it was written by Tom DeFalco and illustrated by Jerry Bingham and Mike Esposito. And the basic gist is the characters of Baron Brimstone, who was an enemy of Machine Man's, and Sandman, who was an enemy of Spider-Man's. The two of them team up to break out of jail and cause a ruckus to get revenge on the character of Machine Man. And Spider-Man gets involved, and Machine Man and Spider-Man initially butt heads, initially thinking that they're both villains due to a misunderstanding. But after having the obligatory misunderstanding fight, they realize, hey, we're on the same side and we've been played by these guys, and so they team up to take on their mutual foes and defeat them. And so this story, unfortunately, it was written by Tom DeFalco at the time that he had taken over writing duties on the Machine Man series. And if you checked out my review on the Machine Man, the Complete Collection, you'll know that Tom DeFalco was not at a point in his career where he was a good writer at this time. And his writing on the Machine Man series, in my opinion, was terrible. And so this actually takes place, I want to say, before issues 18 and 19 of the original series. And so we're still at that time where Tom DeFalco was not a good writer. And, and he unfortunately, he also used a character, Baron Brimstone, who, in my opinion, was a very lame villain. And, and when artist Steve Ditko, came up with him, it was something that, seemed more at home in a comic in the 1950s or 60s as opposed to the 1970s. And Sandman right here, despite the fact that, he's in his classic appearance on the cover, in the comic here, he has this really lame outfit. It's like, some weird helmet thing on his head. But anyway, though, the story really wasn't that good. One, because Tom DeFalco, at this point in time, he wasn't really good at writing dialogue, and I mean he might have come up with a story that was okay at best, but unfortunately the majority of the dialogue here was very cringe-inducing, because he also brings in some of Machine Man's supporting cast from his original comic, and at that point in time, he was with I think it was like an insurance agency, and whenever these characters were involved, it was like, Machine Man was trying to do a Clark Kent, have a civilian job and a civilian identity, but it was like a bad soap opera whenever these characters came up on the page, and unfortunately that doesn't really change in this issue whenever they pop up. So, this story, I mean, like I said, it could have been okay at best, but with the dialogue being very lousy dialogue, and at times feeling like a bad soap opera when it came to the civilian characters. This was a story that the only good thing I can say about it is, I mean, the cover art. Take a look here. It's some old school Frank Miller art. We're talking like way before he did Sin City. We're talking Frank Miller in his Daredevil days. So you have some really good cover art here, and the artwork on the interior is actually pretty good too. It's just that unfortunately, I mean, it's a good looking issue, but the story itself is pretty lousy. So if the only good thing I could say about it is at least it looks good, but it was kind of like, okay, let's just get it over with already. I'm gonna go ahead and give this issue 1 out of 5 stars. I thought it was pretty bad. I would say this one, it's either for Machine Man completionists only, or Marvel team up completionists, or Spider-Man completionists. But if you're looking for like a good standalone story, this is not it. So, all right, one down. Next up is from the same year of 1980, Marvel Team Up Annual 3. And, this, it was the same Spider-Man Team Up title, but there was a point in time where they tried to experiment with it by, instead of having Spider-Man be the main character, they had the characters of Power Man, aka Luke Cage, and Iron Fist, aka Danny Rand, be the main characters of the series. And this annual, which was a bigger story than the usual individual issues, this had the two of them as the main characters, and you also had the Hulk being the sort of the antagonist, and then you had Machine Man in a supporting role. And so this one was actually pretty good. It was written by Roger Stern and illustrated by Herb Trimp, who went on to do the pencil artwork for the first 3 issues of the Machine Man miniseries. And so it was pretty cool, seeing him do some, old artwork on Machine Man before he had gotten to that point. But this is a Power Man Iron Fist story, with Machine Man playing a supporting role. And, the basic story is, Power Man and Iron Fist, they were hiring themselves out as, I guess, like security enforcers or bodyguards, to, people who could afford, to hire them, hence, the name Heroes for Hire. And they end up, on a transportation job, making sure that there's like a computer chip or a microchip or something, gets from, point A to point B safely via train. But unfortunately, an old enemy of theirs, a young woman by the name of Nightshade, was wanting to get a hold of the chip too, so she could use it to take control of, I think it was NORAD's missile guidance systems. But anyway, though, in order to do so, she finds out where the Hulk is, and this was at a time where the Hulk persona was in control and not Bruce Banner. And so she manipulates the Hulk into helping her attack the train convoy that has that computer chip on board, and that's how he comes into conflict with the characters of Power Man and Iron Fist, and Machine Man gets involved because the Delmar Insurance Company that his civilian identity works with, basically they're supposed to be ensuring the transportation along with having the protection of Power Man and Iron Fist. But once he hears that Hulk is involved, he remembers just how deadly of an enemy the Hulk can be, and so he reveals himself to Power Man and Iron Fist, and offers to help them take the Hulk down because he knows just how dangerous he can be. Anyway, though, this was actually a pretty good story. I wouldn't say it was great, but it was good. Part of it was because it was written by Roger Stern, who is, in my opinion, one of the best writers of, the industry, or at least he was. I don't know if he's still writing at this point in time, but anyway, though, he's done a lot of good stories over the years, and this was a fun one. You had some good character interaction, especially between Luke Cage and Danny Rand, and it's kind of like a buddy cop movie feel, and so you got the feeling that these two had been working together for some time, and they had each other's back. They were best friends, and the fact that he was able to not only do a good story, focusing on them, but also managing to work in a guest appearance by Machine Man that actually made sense plot-wise, was impressive because, he actually wrote a 3-issue storyline in the Hulk's book where, he and Machine Man mixed it up, and it was a, pretty intense storyline, just showing how dangerous the Hulk could be, and as well as how powerful the Machine Man was at the time. So it was pretty cool to see that bit of continuity there, and how you had a character, bringing his experience and adding it to the other guys, and instead of say like trying to hog all the glory for himself or something like that. So I thought that was pretty cool. And also, I like the fact that while certain characters from the aforementioned, Delmar Insurance Company that Machine Man worked for in his original series, even though unfortunately some of them pop up, Roger Stern was basically able to say, limit the amount of time they were in the story to where it's like, okay, they popped up, but they didn't have a huge part, so you didn't have to put up with them that much. But I also liked how, the characters of, especially the characters of Machine Man and Luke Cage, there are a couple of times where they, make some, rather thought-provoking observations about the fact that, all four of them, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Machine Man, and the Hulk are all outsiders in one way or another, and basically, Luke Cage is actually able to, at one point, reason with the Hulk, and pointing this out, and and he's basically able to connect with him, on a, I guess, interpersonal level, to a point where Hulk actually calms down and essentially calls a truce, with Machine Man, and Iron Fist, and as well as Luke Cage. And I thought that was, pretty cool. It's like you got your fight, but you also have this, fact that, hey, these characters, some of these characters actually know each other, and they know that, hey, they're not necessarily, one of them is not necessarily a bad person. They just, they need, to be, I guess, appeal to on a gentler level as opposed to, say, all out force. And that was pretty cool to see, especially on Luke Cage's part. And so yeah, this was a good story. Like, not great, but for the time it was written, especially, it was good. It was fun, and occasionally thought provoking as well. Not too thought provoking, but just it had some moments that are kind of like, that's a good point. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one 4 out of 5 stars. So that's 2 down. And next up, we have kind of a 2-for-1, I guess. It's a Marvel 2-in-1, issue 92. Now, this was a series that actually starred the Thing from the Fantastic Four, and it's essentially served as, a similar purpose as the Marvel Team-Up series, with Spider-Man being the main character. Except in this case, the Thing's the main character, but the purpose was the same, to have him team up with characters who maybe had their own book, but weren't so heavy on the spotlight, or even teaming up with characters who did not have their own books, but just were ordinarily background characters, but giving them a chance to be fleshed out. And so this was written in 1982, and it was written by Tom DeFalco. And this was a point where I think he had improved immensely as a writer, because this time around he's got a much better handle on how to develop characters, as well as how to write a story. And the illustrator was a guy named Ron Wilson, and he does a pretty good job too, making stuff look believable and realistic, like nothing too outlandish, despite the fact that there's a lot of sci-fi involved. But no, this issue, while Machine Man does have a part in the story, the main focus, next to the Thing, aka Ben Grimm, is a character named Jocasta, who had shown up in the 1984 miniseries. And having read that, I gathered that she was an important character to Machine Man's, story development. But, because I hadn't, read the issues in which she had appeared with him, I had kind of missed out on the emotional impact, But here, it was a 2-part story, 92 and 93, and this story actually focuses on her. And, you can see, her face right there, sort of like a metal Cleopatra. But, she's a female android who was created by the character of Ultron, who most people will probably recognize from Avengers, the second Avengers movie, where he was voiced by James Spader. But, Ultron was probably one of the deadliest villains that the Avengers had ever faced. And he had initially been defeated by them in, I don't remember what issues they were, but it was in the Avengers' own book, I believe. And he had been defeated, but he had created the character of Jocasta to essentially be his bride. But I think she had rebelled against him, and she joined the Avengers, hoping to, fit in and find a, purpose, in life, and find friends mainly. But unfortunately, I liked how, unfortunately for her, she was basically relegated to background duties. She was seldom, if ever, a character who was given a lot of focus. And so in a meta sense, her character essentially was hurt by that and became fed up with it. And Tom DeFalco actually sort of breaks the fourth wall in a way, in the sense that you have this character who's tired of always just being in the background and taken for granted, and so all she wants is someone to be friends with. But unfortunately, she had left the Avengers because she was fired, more or less, or she was let go, along with several other people who were on the team at the time. And it couldn't have come at a worse time, because she was very vulnerable psychologically, and she is also getting these severe headaches, and apparently androids can get headaches. But she shows up at the Fantastic Four's headquarters, and come and gets the Thing to take a look at her, along with Mr. Fantastic, and they find out that Ultron had left some programming in her, just on the off chance he got defeated or incapacitated. And so basically she's got this program that forces her to resurrect him, if he should ever be slain or destroyed. And so she ends up following that programming, and that's where the Thing tries to beat her to the punch, and Machine Man gets involved as well. And before she follows that rogue programming, her and Machine Man make a meaningful connection, because they're both androids who have a hard time fitting in with humanity, as well as their superhero peers. And but unfortunately, though, once that rogue programming kicks in, they're having to go up against her. But unfortunately, she is able to reanimate Ultron, and at that point, he essentially is able to hypnotize the Thing, into attacking Machine Man. And so that's where this issue comes into play. 93 of Marvel 2-in-1, and it's by the same creative team that did the prior issue, Tom DeFalco and Ron Wilson. And basically there's less of a focus on Jocasta this time around, and more of a focus on Machine Man, and basically how he's having to take on Ben Grimm, who's under Ultron's control, and he's having to basically incapacitate someone that he knows is a hero, but is not in control of himself, while at the same time trying to get through to Jocasta. And unfortunately, in the process, Jocasta makes the ultimate sacrifice, and she deactivates herself, and in the process basically gives Machine Man a window of opportunity to defeat Ultron. But Ultron, as he's about to die, is basically telling Machine Man that he himself, as an Ultron, is the only one who can repair Jocasta. And he's saying, if you love her, you'll save me. But Machine Man just stands by and lets Ultron get destroyed. And at that point, Ben Grimm, he's back to full control of himself. And once he finds out what happens, he was asking Machine Man if he'd had the opportunity, would he have saved Ultron if no one else had been there. And Machine Man says, I don't know, does it really matter at this point? This fellow machine that I've come to feel a bond with, is dead. This woman is dead, and we couldn't save her. And so it was a rather unexpectedly poignant ending to the story, and it's a lot more poignant than I'd expect in a title like say Marvel 2-in-1, because you got your hero fighting hero fight, and the villain who's got this dastardly scheme. But on the other hand, though, you have sort of like this cyberpunk pathos with the character Jocasta. Even though she doesn't have as much of a focus in this issue as she did in the prior issue, she has just enough of a presence there to where once she makes the sacrifice that she does, it hurts. And the character Machine Man, even though the two of them had only briefly made a connection, that's more of a connection that he made with a lot of people in his own series. And so for him to essentially find some form of love with a fellow machine, a female machine, and lose it, it's, like I said, a lot more poignant than you'd expect it to be. So big surprise coming from Tom DeFalco, who at this point in time had definitely improved as a writer. And also he reminded me of just how dangerous of an enemy Ultron could be. So I'm going to give these two issues, 92 and 93 in Marvel 2-in-1, I'm going to give them 4 out of 5 stars. They were good. And I would say that I really think that they should have included these two in the complete collection trade paperback, or at the very least, they could have thrown him into the trade paperback of the miniseries, considering that Jocasta does show up in that miniseries, and her relationship with Machine Man, and that was developed in these 2 issues, does play a part in that miniseries. But unfortunately, I don't know if these are even collected anywhere. So, but for the character of Machine Man, though, these 2 issues are what I would say that they were essential. But unfortunately, I don't think they've yet to be collected anywhere. So, but yeah, these were good. And last but not least, Iron Man 168, and it was done in the same year as the Marvel 2-in-1 issues, 1982, and it was written by Dennis O'Neil, who was the guy who over in DC Comics, he had created the character of Ra's al Ghul, for Batman to go up against. And he also had co-created the character of John Paul Valley, aka Azrael, the guy who for a time took Batman's place. And so, and the artwork was by Luke McDonnell, who would go on to illustrate the Suicide Squad series in the 80s and 90s that was written by John Ostrander. So you have a pretty good creative team here. And this issue, I mean, it's definitely more of a focus on Iron Man, but Machine Man plays a pretty good part too, because this was at a time when Tony Stark was going through a severe alcohol problem, and it was interfering with all the facets of his life, and his business, his personal life, and his superhero life. And Machine Man, he had just I don't know how soon this story was supposed to take place after the Marvel 2-in-1 stories with Jocasta and Ultron, but you get the idea that this issue was supposed to take place not long after those stories, because he's at a point where he's needing to find someone to connect with, and his small group of friends, his human friends, they can only help so much, since they're only human. But he's found out about Iron Man. And this was at a time when not everyone knew that, Iron Man was really Tony Stark. And so Machine Man was one of those people that, thought that Iron Man and Tony Stark were not only 2 different people, but, he honestly thought that Iron Man was actually a fellow android. And so he goes to, Stark's, business, and, hoping to have a sit down with Iron Man just to basically talk, one machine to another. And, maybe, since, Iron Man is a, successful superhero, with, friends, amongst the Avengers, he could maybe, give him some pointers on how to better fit in with humanity, and also just the fact that, he recently lost, a friend of his, Jocasta, who was a fellow machine. He's hoping to find someone else who could be his friend as well. But unfortunately, Tony Stark is not in a receptive mood, and due to his alcoholism, he misreads Machine Man's intentions completely and starts a fight with him. And so you have it's basically, try to imagine a drunk driver, but taken up to 11. Instead of just being drunk and driving a car and hurting people, you've got a drunk in a powerful suit of armor that could destroy a whole city block. And basically he's out of control. And so you have Machine Man, who doesn't have the best opinion of humanity, ironically having to protect that very same humanity from a guy who is human but is out of control. And there's a rather telling moment where you see just how far Tony Stark is when he basically he almost causes the death of a couple of employees of his, and he doesn't even see that they're about to die, and Machine Man basically risks his own well-being to get them out of harm's way, but taking damage from Iron Man at the same time. And you see at this point not only just how far gone Tony Stark is, but you see just how far Machine Man has come as a character, or as a hero as it were, because like I said, he has no great love for humanity, but at the same time he is trying to do right by the world. And you see that just in the way he puts his life on the line to save someone he doesn't even know. But yeah, this was a good story, and I would say that if you're a fan of Machine Man, this is definitely a story that's worth having. And it would have been nice to have had it included in either that complete collection, or say in the 1984 miniseries as well. But at the same time, I mean, it's a good standalone story, and you see, it's sort of like how far can one character fall, but at the same time you see how much another character has improved as time has gone on. And so I'm going to go ahead and give this one 4 out of 5 stars. It was good. And yeah, so yeah, I forgot to say, the Marvel 2-in-1 storyline, I'm giving these 4 out of 5 stars as well. So yeah, those are the individual stories that took place in between the stories that were in the complete collection, as well as the 1984 miniseries. And I just wanted to fill y'all in on what happened in those particular stories, and whether or not they were essential to Machine Man's story arc as a character. And so I hope that helped to fill in a few plot holes. And thank y'all very much for taking the time to check out my review. And I hope y'all enjoyed it. And y'all have a good night. Take care. Bye.